Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see about the psychological approach. Psychological criticism actually deals with the work of literature mainly on an expression in the fictional form, and it deals with the state of mind and the structure of personality of the individual author. That is, when we read any fictional work, we will analyze it. A critic will analyze the book only based on the writer, because he already has an idea about what this writer will write, and therefore he will analyze the literary work based on his opinion about the writer. And psychological approach is an approach which emerged only in the early 19th century, and before that we have only the romantic replacement of earlier mimetic and pragmatic views which were used for analyzing any literary work. And in 1827, Thomas Carlyle said, that is, when a critic is analyzing a book, he will be searching for the type of the nature of the poet, and based on the nature of the poet only he will analyze the poems which are written by the poet. And particularly if you see in the romantic period, we find that most of the literary work we analyzed based on the writer. That is, they will think about the personality of the writer in order to interpret the literary work produced by him, and at the same time they will see about the biographical and the personality of the author for the reference to the literary works. And also they will associate the literary work subjectively and consciously of the writer in the mode of reading a literary work. And therefore we find that the writer's personality and the writer's background plays a very important role in analyzing the work. Earlier we have the psychological approach, and John Keble in 1844 he produced a series of Latin lectures in the name of On the Healing Power of Poetry, where he said that though this Freudian literary theory was there for 10 years earlier than that, Keble said that generally the writers, the author, expresses his reticence and shame which he has experienced throughout his career, that is from his young age, and that is what he expresses indirectly in his work. And therefore the overpowering emotion or the ruling taste of feeling which has directly affected the writer will be an indirect expression in his works. And he says that when he does like this, the poet gets a healing relief, because all this time he has had a secret mental emotion, and that has always been in him, and therefore when he expresses it in his works, he gets a relief. And therefore he says the writer is the main person to analyze any work. But in the present era, many critics, they apply this psychological approach while discussing any work of literature with reference to formalism, new criticism, structuralism and deconstruction. From 1920 onwards, this psychological literary criticism has come to be known as psychoanalytic criticism, where they apply a lot of theories proposed by Sigmund Freud. Because Freud had developed the dynamic form of psychology which he called as psychoanalysis, which is a means of analysis and also a therapy for neurosis. And it has had many developments and practices in the history of civilization, which includes the civilization after warfare, mythology and religion, as well as literature and the other arts also. They have their own impact on the work of a writer. And Freud's brief comment on the workings of the artist's imagination at the end of 23rd lecture of his introduction to psychoanalysis supplemented to many of the other lectures in that book. And it also says about classical psychoanalytic criticism, which means literature and the other arts, like how we have dreams and then we have neurotic symptoms, which is a combination of all the imagined or what we fantasize or what we wish, or something which is denied by reality or prohibited by the social standards of morality and propriety. and which the writer wants to express generally comes out in this way. And even mainly the sexual wishes which come into conflict and which are repressed by the author because of the fear of censor. But the artist's mind is totally fantasized with satisfaction, and therefore he tries to express all these in a distorted form in his work. And Kenneth Brooke, in his, who is considered as a great American critic, philosopher, translator, poet, and short story writer, considers a very difficult critic to classify. His advocacy of text is, he says we have to have a close reading of the text, and he is very much interested in the theories of I.A. Richards, and Burke can be associated with the new critics. However, the believing that the main idea of criticism is to use all that there is to use, that is whatever is there in a book should be used. And he also applies his knowledge of linguistics, psychology, theology and sociology to analyze a literary criticism. And Burke's perspective and complex reading of a text has given him a great acclaim from his literary theorists, and his audience, however, have been limited to this select group due to the eclectic and erudite nature of his approach. And Burke's kind of poetic analysis has the effect of making ambiguous and the whole source of aesthetic interest, leaving out the account of indicative order, the out and into which the poem finally decides that they shall fall. Kenneth Brooke's The Poetic Process suggests the climatic style, poet's perspective and intellectual concepts. It also suggests the consciousness and mood, judgment or any writer through a psychological aspect, feeling for such arrangement of subject matter as produce, crescendo, contrast, comparison, balance, repetition, disclosure, reversal, contradiction, expansion, magnification, series and so on. And as a methodology, it can provide us with great insights, but we should also agree that poetry is valuable and we already know which poems are good and which are bad. But as a war strategy, that is not enough, for one cannot deny the enemy's conclusions and at the same time accept his premises. Accept the logician's premises that there is no semantic truth in poetry, and you must subscribe to ideal verbal anarchy and thoroughly anti-authoritarian aesthetic, which, as Burke himself warns us, ends by accepting any authority. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box, like the video, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe and support. Thank you.